After a year-long war of words between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Walt Disney, the fight is now going to court. The entertainment giant earlier this week sued the Republican leader to prevent the state from ending the company's virtual autonomy in Central Florida, where it has its theme parks. Disney has accused the governor of retaliation after the business spoke out against DeSantis' efforts to strike discussions of sex and gender from schools. The lawsuit has now led some to believe that DeSantis may regret his verbal attacks on the media company.
Disney does have a strong case.
Leslie Kendrick is the director of the Center for the First Amendment at the University of Virginia School of Law.
Disney has essentially a special relationship with the government of Florida. It has a deal that not everyone has, although there are many other entities that have enjoyed special tax districts that are similar to what Disney has enjoyed. But the government can't condition your keeping that benefit on your political views.
The 73-page lawsuit comes a year after the company criticized a Florida law banning classroom discussion of sexuality and gender identity with younger children, prompting DeSantis to repeatedly attack woke Disney. Disney said DeSantis' actions amounted to a targeted campaign of government retaliation.
The reason we have the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment is primarily to keep a check on people in power.
Ken Polson is a First Amendment expert at Middle Tennessee State University.
If our government abuses its power, we have the free speech right to call them out. We have the free press right to investigate and report on them. We have the right to assemble and raise our voices in protest, and we have the right to petition government for redress of grievances. 4 of the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment are designed to keep government honest and to keep those in charge from using their power to violate our collective rights under the Bill of Rights.
I don't think the suit has merit. I think it's political.
DeSantis has called Disney's lawsuit a politically motivated attack and accused the company of lacking accountability. The governor's spokesperson said on Wednesday that his office was unaware of any legal right that allows a company to operate its own government or maintain special privileges, a reference to the decades-old district that is home to Disney World. For Disney to prevail, a jury would have to find a connection between the company's comments and the changes to the development district, renamed under DeSantis' control as the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District.
America should always pay her bills. Period. Full stop.
House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries on Friday called a Republican bill that would slash federal spending in exchange for raising the debt limit a ransom note, insisting GOP lawmakers raise the nation's borrowing limit without conditions.
We will have a conversation with House Republicans about the budget. President Biden has produced a budget. House Republicans produced a ransom note.
That ransom note is a reference to the bill House Republicans narrowly passed this week to raise the government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling, while at the same time imposing sweeping spending cuts over the next decade. The bill isn't expected to pass the Democratically controlled Senate, and President Joe Biden said he would veto it if it did. But the measure, pushed by Republican House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, is meant to pressure Biden into negotiations on cutting spending, even as the White House and congressional Democrats insist on a debt limit increase without forcing concessions.
That's not negotiable.
Here's McCarthy on Wednesday calling on Biden to negotiate.
We passed this early. We are in April, way ahead of the debt limit. We are the only party to take fiscal action in a sound mind that would lift the debt limit so we wouldn't have economic damage. We've also put us back on a path to end the Washington wasteful spending and to grow our economy and make us stronger.
And at least one Democrat is open to talks. Representative Josh Gottheimer, a moderate in his party, said on Friday that while he rejected the GOP's spending cuts, it is time for Biden to begin daily dialogue with Republicans to avoid a calamitous default. But the White House is standing firm. It says it will not negotiate on raising the debt ceiling, a move necessary to cover the cost of spending and tax cuts previously approved by Congress. the U.S. Treasury Department could run out of ways to pay its bills in a matter of weeks, and a default would cripple the U.S. economy with global reverberations.
Russian airstrikes have hit cities across Ukraine, including the capital Kyiv, in the first large-scale attack in nearly 2 months. Several people were killed after residential areas were targeted in the early hours of Friday morning. In the central city of Uman, there were a number of fatalities and many wounded after a residential building was struck, leaving firefighters and rescue workers combing through the rubble for survivors and to retrieve the dead. Ukraine's interior minister told Reuters that over half of the flats in the building were completely destroyed. This man's apartment was one of those hit. He describes being woken at 4:30 a.m. by an explosion which trapped him until rescuers were able to free him.
My flat is on the 7th floor, on the other side of that block. We felt the impact. We heard the explosion. I went to the door. I unlocked it, but I couldn't open it because it was blocked. My neighbors are gone. No one's left. There is no one alive in the whole block. Only the kitchens were left standing, from the 1st till the 5th floor.
Further east in Dnipro, a woman and her child were killed at home, while one child is reported to have been hospitalized in a town outside of Kyiv after missile debris hit an apartment block. Explosions were also reported in Mykolaiv, Poltava, and Kremenchuk. The Ukrainian military said it has shot down all but 2 of the cruise missiles fired by Russia. In Kyiv, officials reported that air defense units had destroyed 11 missiles and 2 drones. Writing on Telegram, President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the attacks, which come as Kyiv prepares to launch its long-awaited spring counteroffensive. Using hundreds of tanks and armoured vehicles sent by the West, Ukraine plans to try and retake Russian-occupied territory in the east. While it is not clear what Russia was targeting in the overnight attacks, it has regularly struck civilian infrastructure. Although such attacks have tapered off since winter ended, with Ukraine's Western allies suggesting Russia had used up much of its long-range missile arsenal. Moscow denies targeting civilians, but such airstrikes and shelling have killed thousands of people and devastated Ukrainian cities.
British Republicans are seizing on the lavish coronation of King Charles III next week to protest against the monarchy. Supporters of anti-monarchy group Republic are planning their biggest ever protest along the royal procession route. They'll hold up placards, boo loudly, and chant "Not my king" as Charles passes in his gold coach, seeing the pomp and ceremony as the perfect chance to expose what they regard as an anachronistic institution. Polls show Charles to be less popular than his mother, Queen Elizabeth, who died last year. Graham Smith heads Republic.
I think the monarchy's in a lot of trouble because they've lost their star player, support is clearly going down, interest is going down, and that's a big problem for them. So enthusiasm for the coronation is about 9%.
Anti-monarchy protests tend to be small, and polls show the majority of Britons still want a royal family. Support is slipping though. About a decade ago, 3/4 of Britons backed the royals. A YouGov poll this week put it at 58%. And surveys suggest the young are less keen than older generations. Only 9% of Britons say they care a great deal about the coronation. Most British newspapers still support the 1,000-year-old monarchy, though The Guardian has examined their opaque finances and put the King's personal wealth at almost $2.5 billion. Charles says he wants a slimmed-down monarchy which would be less expensive to run. Some, like author and Black Studies Professor Kehinde Andrews, question whether there's a way forward.
You have to accept that there are some institutions that just can't be reformed. So the only thing that the royal family can do in serious is to abolish itself.
Demonstrations against the monarchy are also planned in the capitals of Scotland and Wales. Those 2 nations, out of the 4 that make up the United Kingdom, are now led by Republicans. Historian of the Royals Alice Hunt says she enjoys reflecting on Britain's past, but that doesn't mean nothing should change.
But I think all of this would still be part of our history and story, and image, identity, if they had a much reduced role or if they weren't there at all. I think, we would still go to Buckingham Palace and remember and think. But I don't think they have a place in modern Britain.
If we're being honest, always going to be honest, the lithium produced in Canada is going to be more expensive because we don't use slave labor, because we put forward environmental responsibility as something we actually expect to be abided by, because we count on working with, in partnership with Indigenous peoples, paying fair living wages, expecting security and safety standards. What the world needs to decide, and are still in the process of deciding, is whether or not we're actually going to value the things we value throughout our supply chains. We wouldn't expect someone to be able to open up a company upstream from our towns and dump effluent into the river here. Why do we accept that we pay for goods that come from companies that do the exact same thing on the other side of the world? We have all the resources above ground, and we have resources of lithium and critical minerals with partnerships with Indigenous peoples that we're going to be able to deliver into those supply chains in a resilient way, so you're not dependent on places around the world.